My name is Diane Whitaker. I am 41 years old, and I was fired in front of 200 employees by a man who smiled the whole time he destroyed my reputation. Greg Coleman stood on the stage of our Chicago logistics company, held the microphone like a weapon, and told the entire room that I had lost critical company data. Then he looked straight at me and said, "Diane was a lucky woman this company was kind enough to carry." The room went so quiet I could hear a phone buzzing 3 rows behind me. I did not cry. I did not defend myself. I unclipped my badge, set it gently on the table, and walked out with the one thing Greg did not know I had: proof. 48 hours after he fired me, at 2:13 in the morning, my phone lit up on the kitchen counter. I almost ignored it until I saw Greg Coleman's name glowing on the screen. The same man who had humiliated me in front of the whole company was now breathing hard into the phone like the building was burning down around him. "Diane," he said, and for the first time since I had known him, his voice shook. "The freight system is locked. Dispatch can't release routes. Drivers are sitting in the yards. Meridian Medical is threatening to cancel the $18 million contract by 9. I said nothing. Then he lowered his voice and said the words I had known would come eventually. "You're the only one who knows how to get us back in." I looked at the clock, then at the printed termination letter, still lying on my table. "No, Greg," I said quietly. "I'm the woman your company was kind enough to carry." Before I tell you how Greg Coleman went from firing me in front of 200 people to begging for my help at 2:13 in the morning, do me one small favor. Subscribe if you believe the truth always has a way of coming back. And tell me in the comments where you are listening from tonight, because this story begins 6 years before that phone call, inside a cold glass office tower on West Wacker Drive in Chicago. Back then, Northbridge Freight Systems was growing fast and drowning at the same time. Shipment delays, lost paperwork, angry drivers, and clients who were one mistake away from walking out the door. I was hired to fix the chaos. Not to lead, not to be seen, just to keep everything from falling apart. By then, I had spent most of my adult life being the person companies called when quiet problems turned into expensive disasters. At Northbridge, my title was Director of Information Technology Operations. But what I really did was hold the company's nervous system together. Every shipment request, every driver route, every warehouse scan, every client update, every late-night exception passed through the freight management platform I had helped build from scratch. I knew which servers groaned before a holiday rush. I knew which client portals failed under pressure. I knew which backup process could save us in 10 minutes and which one would bury us by morning. But to most of the executives, I was just Diane from IT, useful when something broke, invisible when everything worked. And for 6 years, everything worked because I made sure it did. Northbridge was not a tiny office with a few delivery vans. We had more than 200 employees, 3 regional warehouses, and 47 active carrier partners. With shipments moving across the Midwest every single day, retail chains depended on us before the holiday rush. Medical suppliers depended on us when late did not mean inconvenient, it meant dangerous. One broken route could cost a client thousands. One failed update could leave drivers sitting in loading yards with no instructions at all. That was why the freight management system mattered so much. It was not just software, it was the pulse of the company. Dispatch used it. Accounting used it. Clients watched it. Drivers trusted it. And for 6 years I had built it, repaired it, protected it, and quietly improved it while other people stood on stages, taking credit for its success. The strange thing about doing your job well in technology is that silence becomes your only reward. If the system stayed online, nobody clapped. If the routes updated on time, nobody asked who fixed the overnight sync at 3 in the morning. If a client portal survived a holiday surge, the executives called it strong leadership. not strong infrastructure. I became the woman people remembered only when something broke. In meetings, they called me technical support, even though I was the one designing the disaster recovery plans that protected millions in contracts. Sales directors shook hands with clients while I sat 3 rooms away watching server loads climb. Operations managers collected bonuses when delivery times improved, while my team was told to keep doing whatever magic we did. I told myself that recognition did not matter. I told myself stability was enough. The part no one saw was the cost. I had slept under my desk during winter storms. I had missed my niece's graduation because a warehouse scanner update failed at the worst possible hour. And one year I spent Christmas Eve alone in the server room, eating a sandwich off a paper towel while the executives toasted a record quarter on the floor above me. I did not resent the work. I loved solving problems. What hurt was slowly realizing the company loved what I protected, but not the woman doing the protecting. Greg Coleman arrived on a gray Monday morning in March, wearing a navy suit, a polished smile, and the easy confidence of a man who believed every room belonged to him. The board introduced him as our new chief operating officer, the man who would modernize operations and remove outdated thinking. He shook my hand warmly that first day and said he had heard I was the woman who kept the machines alive. For the first week, he played the part perfectly. He praised my work in meetings, asked sharp questions in front of the executives, and told me Northbridge was lucky to have someone who understood the bones of the company. That was exactly why what came next worked so well. He did not start by attacking me. He started by making everyone believe he respected me. Within 2 weeks, Greg stopped asking how the system worked and started asking who controlled it. That was the moment I understood he had not come to learn Northbridge. He had come to take it apart. His first real move arrived with a young man named Trevor Coleman. Greg introduced him during a Tuesday operations meeting as his nephew, then quickly added, "He earned his place here." Trevor was 26, fresh from a consulting job with more buzzwords than results. And he walked into our department like someone touring a house he had already decided to buy. Greg called him a rising systems strategist. But Trevor could not explain the difference between a test environment and live production access without glancing down at his notes. Still, Greg sat him in the chair beside mine in every meeting, asked me to bring him up to speed, and started copying him on security threads he had no clearance to read. I understood the message before anyone said it out loud. Greg was not preparing Trevor to support me. He was preparing him to replace me. The first warning sign came when Greg asked me to send Trevor our full recovery map, server architecture, access hierarchy, backup schedule, encryption vault procedure, emergency failover checklist. He said it was for leadership visibility, but no chief operating officer had ever needed that depth of technical detail before. I replied politely and asked human resources, legal, and information security to confirm in writing exactly what Trevor was authorized to see. Greg did not like that. 5 minutes later, he walked into my office, closed the door halfway, and said, "Diane, don't make simple things difficult." I smiled, opened a new folder on my desktop, and saved the entire email chain. From that day forward, every strange request, every access change, every odd meeting note went into that folder. After that, the walls around me began closing in, quietly. Meetings I had led for years were suddenly rescheduled without anyone telling me. Vendor calls happened with Trevor on the line, and me marked optional. Greg started asking department heads to send their system concerns directly to him, then forwarded only fragments of those concerns to my team, so it would look like we were slow to respond. Trevor started renaming dashboard labels, moving documentation folders, and adding optimization notes to procedures he barely understood. When small errors appeared, Greg never asked what happened. He asked why I had not prevented them. In one leadership meeting, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Some people get protective of old systems because those systems are the only reason they still matter." Nobody looked at me. Everybody knew who he meant. That was when I stopped hoping it was just arrogance. It was a campaign. The manufactured mistake arrived on a Tuesday morning at 9:17. Dispatch reported that several shipment records in the Indianapolis region were showing duplicate route numbers. On the surface, it looked serious. But when I pulled the access logs, the truth was obvious. The change had come from Trevor's account at 11:48 the night before. Inside a live production table he never should have touched, I documented everything. Timestamp, user identification, affected records, and a clean rollback path. Then, before I could send the full incident report, Greg called an emergency leadership meeting. He walked in holding a printed screenshot like a courtroom exhibit and said, "This is what happens when old systems are protected by people who cannot keep up." I had the logs open on my laptop before he even finished accusing me. Trevor's user identification was right there. The production table was right there. The timestamp was right there. Even the unauthorized query was right there, clean enough for any auditor to understand in 5 minutes. But Greg did not want facts. He wanted a scene. Every time I tried to explain, he cut me off with words like excuses and legacy thinking and lack of accountability. I looked around the conference room and saw people staring at the table, not because they believed him, but because they were afraid of being next. So I stopped arguing. I closed my laptop halfway, folded my hands, and asked one calm question. "Would you like my formal incident report submitted to Human Resources and Legal before any disciplinary action is taken?" Greg smiled like he had been waiting for it. "No, Diane," he said. "I think we've heard enough." The next morning, Greg turned my humiliation into a company event. At 10 o'clock sharp, 200 employees were called into the main warehouse auditorium, the same room where we usually celebrated new contracts and safety records. I stood near the front, still naive enough to believe this was going to be a discussion about the incident report. Then I saw Trevor standing beside Greg with my access badge already printed and clipped to his jacket. Greg stepped to the microphone and said, "Today, Northbridge is choosing accountability over excuses." My stomach went cold. He accused me of losing critical shipment data, resisting modernization, and putting client relationships at risk. Then, in front of everyone I had protected for 6 years, he announced that my employment was terminated, effective immediately. And then he said the sentence that made the entire room stop breathing. He looked at me, smiled just enough for the front row to see it, and said, "Diane Whitaker was a lucky woman this company was kind enough to carry." For a second, nobody moved. I heard a forklift beeping somewhere behind the warehouse doors. I saw Megan from dispatch cover her mouth with her hand. I saw 2 of my own engineers staring at the concrete floor like shame had a weight to it. Trevor stood beside Greg with my replacement badge already on his chest, trying not to look too pleased. My face burned. My hands stayed still. I did not beg and I did not explain. I reached into my pocket, took out my identification badge, and set it on the table in front of Greg. Then I looked at him and said, "Please document that statement in the termination file." Before I left Northbridge, I did exactly what Greg never expected me to do. I followed procedure. I did not delete a single file. I did not keep a password. I did not leave a hidden trap inside the system he had just accused me of damaging. I returned my laptop to Human Resources, signed the equipment receipt, and asked for my own copy. Then, from the guest terminal in the lobby, I sent one final handoff email to Human Resources, to Legal, to the Chief Financial Officer, to Greg, and to Information Security. I listed every active system, every backup location, every pending maintenance warning, and every access permission that needed review. At the very bottom, I wrote one sentence. As of 11:42 in the morning, I no longer retain administrative authority over any Northbridge production environment. That email became the line Greg could never cross later. I attached the access audit, the incident draft, the backup inventory, and a time-stamped export showing exactly which accounts still held production privileges after my termination. I also included a note that every encryption key, recovery token, and emergency credential was stored inside Northbridge's corporate vault, not on any personal device, notebook, or private account of mine. It was boring. It was formal. It was exactly the kind of email executives ignore until their lawyers need it. Before sending, I copied my personal attorney, blind copied my own secure archive, and requested a delivery confirmation from the company's server. At 11:49 in the morning, the receipt came through. Human Resources had received it. Legal had received it. The Chief Financial Officer had received it. Greg had received it. From that moment on, if anything broke, they could blame me out loud, but never on paper. By the next afternoon, Trevor Coleman was sitting in my old office with my nameplate still warm on the door. Greg announced him as interim systems lead, as if a new title could replace 6 years of memory, judgment, and scars. Trevor wanted to prove he belonged there, so instead of reading the handoff documents, he skimmed the first page, rolled his eyes at my warnings, and told my former team, "We're not going to run this place like a museum anymore." Then he opened the production dashboard and started cleaning up what he called Diane's clutter. One of the things he deleted was an old-looking security key tied to the emergency authentication chain. He thought it was useless. It was not. That key was like a master handshake between machines. Without it, the dispatch system, the warehouse scanners, the routing service, and the client portal could no longer prove to each other that they were trustworthy. Each piece would simply stop accepting the others, one at a time, like a building where every door silently changes its own lock. At first, the damage looked small enough for Greg to wave away. A few dispatch screens froze. 2 warehouse scanners stopped syncing. One driver in Joliet called in because his route had vanished from the mobile app. Trevor told everyone it was normal transition noise, but by 6:40 that evening, the alerts started stacking like falling bricks. Shipment confirmations were delayed. Client dashboards showed old data. Drivers were receiving duplicate route assignments. Then the authentication service began rejecting internal requests one by one, like doors locking down a hallway from the far end. Dispatch could not release new loads. Accounting could not verify delivery statuses. Customer service had no answers for the angry clients calling in every 5 minutes. The system was not dead yet, but it was bleeding from places Trevor did not know how to find. And the worst part was that every backup process he tried only pushed the failure deeper. By 7:25, the problem had a dollar amount attached to it. Meridian Medical Supply, our largest healthcare client, sent a notice marked urgent to Greg, to the Chief Financial Officer, and to legal. Their trucks were scheduled to move temperature-sensitive medical equipment before sunrise, and our system could not confirm routes, driver assignments, or warehouse release codes. If Northbridge failed to restore reliable service by 9 o'clock the next morning, Meridian had the contractual right to cancel the $18 million agreement and trigger a penalty clause for operational disruption. Suddenly, this was no longer an information technology issue Greg could bury under corporate language. It was a board-level emergency. One deleted security key had turned his little power move into a financial fire. Greg's first instinct was not to fix the truth. It was to find someone else to bury underneath it. On the emergency call with the Chief Financial Officer and legal, he suggested that I must have withheld a password, hidden a recovery step, or left behind some kind of technical trap out of bitterness. For a moment, I am told, the room went silent. Then Carol Reyes, the chief financial officer, opened the handoff email I had sent before walking out. There it was, in black and white. Every access removal, every vault location, every backup note, every warning about unauthorized production changes. Legal pulled the delivery receipt. Human Resources confirmed the timestamp. Information Security confirmed that my administrative rights had ended exactly when I said they had. Greg kept talking, but his words were losing oxygen. The paper trail did not point at me. It pointed straight back at the man who had ignored it. Before I tell you what Greg sounded like when he finally called me at 2:13 in the morning, let me ask you something. Have you ever done the work, protected the people, solved the problems, and then watched someone else twist the whole story until you became the villain in it? If you have, write the words "I know that feeling" in the comments. And if you believe proof is stronger than panic, subscribe. Because this is the part where the woman they called disposable became the only person standing between Greg Coleman and an $18 million disaster. At 2:13 in the morning, my phone lit up on the kitchen counter while I was sitting alone with a mug of cold tea and that termination letter still folded beside my laptop. Greg Coleman's name flashed across the screen. For 3 rings, I just stared at it. Then I answered without saying hello. On the other end, I heard alarms, voices, and someone swearing in the background. Then I heard Carol Reyes, the chief financial officer, say from somewhere behind him, "Greg, put it on speaker. Legal needs to hear this." That was when I realized he had not called because he wanted to. He had called because the room had forced him to. "Diane," he said, and all the arrogance had drained out of his voice. "The system is locked. Dispatch is blind. Meridian is asking for live route verification by 9, and Trevor can't restore authentication." I let the silence stretch long enough for him to feel it. Then he said the sentence I had known was coming since I walked out of that auditorium. "You're the only one who knows how to fix this." I did not laugh. I did not remind him of the stage. I did not ask whether Trevor's new badge could fix it. I simply said, "Greg, I no longer work for Northbridge." He started talking fast, saying this was an emergency, saying people's jobs were on the line, saying I needed to be reasonable. That word almost made me smile. Reasonable. The man who had destroyed my name in front of 200 employees was asking me for reason. I opened a blank document and started typing notes as he spoke. Then I said, "If Northbridge needs my professional help, legal can send me an emergency consulting agreement. Until then, this call is not technical support. It is evidence." 23 minutes later, a video meeting invitation appeared in my inbox. The subject line read, "Emergency Systems Recovery, Legal Present." I almost smiled at that last part. On the screen were Greg, pale and furious, Carol Reyes, still in a blazer at nearly 3 in the morning, Brian Foster from Legal, and a silent Human Resources director taking notes. Trevor was there too, but his camera was off. Carol spoke first. "Diane, thank you for joining. We understand you are no longer an employee. We are requesting emergency consulting support." That one sentence changed the entire room. I was not the woman being blamed anymore. I was the outside expert they had to hire back. I told them my conditions were simple: a written agreement, an emergency rate, liability protection, full audit access, and every instruction documented, with legal present. I read my terms slowly so no one could pretend they misunderstood. First, Northbridge would sign a 72-hour emergency consulting contract at my crisis rate, with a 50% retainer wired before I touched a single keyboard, payable whether the system recovered in 1 hour or 3 days. Second, legal would issue written liability protection, stating that I was not responsible for any failure that occurred after my termination. Third, Human Resources would open a formal review into my public firing and Greg's accusations. And fourth, Greg Coleman would send a written apology acknowledging that he had accused me without ever reviewing the incident report. Greg's jaw tightened on camera. "This is extortion," he said. I looked at Carol, not at him. "No," I replied. "This is what professional help costs after public defamation." Greg tried to fight it for exactly 4 minutes. He argued about the rate. He objected to the apology. He said the human resources review could wait until after the crisis. Then Carol looked straight into the camera and said, "Greg, if Meridian cancels by 9, this company loses $18 million before breakfast. Sign the agreement." For the first time since he had walked into Northbridge, Greg had no room left to perform. Legal sent the contract. Human resources confirmed the review would begin immediately. Then, at 3:06 in the morning, the apology appeared in my inbox. It was stiff, cold, and clearly written through clenched teeth, but it had his name at the bottom. I read the first line twice. Diane Whitaker was accused publicly before all relevant facts were reviewed. I did not smile. I just saved the document and said, "Now we can begin." I logged in through a temporary consultant account while legal recorded the session and information security watched every click. Within 8 minutes, I knew what Trevor had done. The emergency authentication chain was broken because he had deleted a security key labeled Legacy without understanding that Legacy did not mean useless. I restored the key from the corporate vault, rebuilt the trust link between dispatch and routing, and forced a clean revalidation across every warehouse scanner. No speeches, no victory lap. Just commands, logs, confirmations, and silence. At 4:18 in the morning, the first route released successfully. Then another. Then 37 more. For the first time that night, the room stopped panicking and started breathing. But restoring the system also restored the truth. Every step I took opened another log that Greg wished no one would ever see. The deleted security key was tied to Trevor's account. The permission change that gave him that power had been approved from Greg's own executive login. And the warning I had sent 3 weeks earlier, the one telling them not to give production access to unverified users, was sitting unread in Greg's inbox. Legal asked me to pause and share my screen. I pulled up the audit trail, line by line, without ever raising my voice. Trevor had deleted the key at 4:36 in the afternoon. Greg had approved his elevated access at 4:02. My own administrative rights had ended at 11:42 in the morning, 2 days earlier, exactly as my handoff email said. No theory, no emotion. Just timestamps, user identifications, and decisions. Greg did not say a word. He did not have to. The system was testifying for me. At 8:42 in the morning, 17 minutes before Meridian's deadline, the first verified route packet reached their operations portal. Then the temperature control logs synced. Then the driver assignments cleared. Carol stayed on the call while Meridian's director confirmed the shipment could move. Northbridge had kept the $18 million contract, but nobody cheered. The damage report still had to be written. Meridian wanted a full explanation, a risk control plan, and proof that unauthorized access would never happen again. Greg tried to call it a successful recovery. Carol looked at the audit trail on her screen and said, "No, Greg, this was a preventable failure." That was the moment everyone in that room understood the company had survived the morning, but Greg Coleman had not survived the truth. By noon, Human Resources had opened a formal investigation, and this time Greg could not control the room. Legal reviewed the termination file and found no completed incident report, no documented performance warning, and no technical review supporting the public accusation against me. Information security confirmed that Trevor had been granted elevated access without proper approval. Then they found the conflict of interest disclosure that Greg had never filed before placing his own nephew into a sensitive systems role. Trevor was suspended first. He left the building through the side entrance with a cardboard box and no audience. Greg lasted 3 more days. In the board meeting, he tried one last time to call it a misunderstanding. Carol laid 3 documents on the table in front of him. My handoff email, Trevor's access log, and Greg's unsigned conflict of interest disclosure. Nobody raised their voice. That was what made it worse. The silence in that room was colder than any argument could have been. There was no shouting, no security dragging anyone out. Just calendar invitations quietly disappearing, office glass turning dark. And people who had once feared him suddenly speaking about him in the past tense. A week later, Carol called and offered me my old position back, with a new title, a higher salary, and a direct reporting line to her. 6 years ago, that offer might have felt like justice. But after everything Greg had done, I finally understood something simple. Being needed is not the same as being valued. I thanked her for the offer and declined. I told her I would finish the consulting contract, document the new recovery process, and train a properly approved team, but I would not return as an employee. Northbridge had taught me my worth by trying to erase it, so I used the emergency fee, the apology letter, and my clean record to open my own information technology operations consulting company. 1 year later, my company had 5 employees, 14 active clients, and a small office overlooking the Chicago River. On the first Friday of every month, my team and I ate breakfast together at the conference table before the phone started ringing. No speeches, no fake leadership slogans, just coffee, warm bagels, quiet laughter, and people who knew exactly whose work kept the lights on. 3 of those clients had once belonged to Northbridge. They did not come to me because I promised them revenge. They came because they trusted the woman who stayed calm when everything else collapsed. Sometimes I still think about that auditorium. Greg's smile. The silence of 200 people who watched me walk out alone. But I do not carry it the same way anymore. That day did not end my career. It ended my willingness to make myself small for people who needed my work but refused to respect my name. So remember this. Never confuse someone's silence for weakness. Sometimes the person pushed out of the room is the only one who knows how to keep the whole building standing. If this story stayed with you, tell me in the comments. Would you have stayed quiet and gathered your proof? Or would you have confronted them the moment it happened? And if you believe in the quiet kind of karma, the kind that arrives right on time, subscribe to the channel for more real stories about betrayal, boundaries, and the justice that finally brings peace.